Hello and welcome to All About Billings. We are a show dedicated to discovering the people who make Billings a great place to work and live. We will interview local business people, community leaders, entrepreneurs, artists, and entertainers, and learn from their successes, their failures, and their connection to Billings. I'm your host, Nancy Brook, broker and owner at Billings Best Real Estate. And today, it is my pleasure to have as my guest an entrepreneur who does everything from potatoes to photo booths, Kate Mysse. Welcome to the show, Kate.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you here. And I just love meeting new people, as I've told you. It's just so fun. And
Absolutely.
I really love the fact that you are just not a one business person. It seems like what's in your blood is entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So why don't you start by just telling us about your businesses?
Absolutely. So like you said, I like to be multifaceted. Business in general just excites me and I nerd out on it. So coming to talk about business is like my guilty pleasure. But anyway, my two businesses, one is called Baked and Loaded Co. and it does loaded baked potatoes. We're a mobile food trailer right now. Currently kind of working on some potential expansion operations. And then I also own Summit 360 Photobooth and Events. And we specialize in 360 photo booth rentals. So best way to kind of describe that, it's a little bit different than a traditional photo booth. So you get on a platform, there's a rotating arm, and what it does is it creates a really cool kind of boomerang video that goes slow-mo, fast-mo, and then we just send out digital files right after people get on the booth.
So I just saw it right before the show, and it's almost like you're spinning on a turnstile.
Yes,
right?
So it looks like it. Yep, so what it is it's a circular platform. It's about 40 inches wide. And it has a rotating arm around it that has a motorized base. And so the platform itself doesn't move, so you don't have to worry about getting dizzy or anything when you get on there. But the arm rotates around, and it has the technology uses special effects to then create that boomerang, forward, slow kind of motion, and then send that digital file. So yeah, it's a very unique way, kind of a very unique take on the photo booth. I did a lot of event stuff when I lived in Texas, and that was something that I saw down there when I was living down there. And Montana is just naturally a little bit slower to adapt to industry trends. So I did some market research in the area and found we didn't really have much for 360 photo booths. So I thought might as well start another business around it.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, and how did you get interested in business? I know you said you went to school at University of Wyoming, right?
So, I graduated with a marketing degree from University of Wyoming. And it's funny, I actually had no plans of ever owning a business or getting into entrepreneurship. My dad, he was always an entrepreneur and had his hands in a lot of different businesses. And I saw how hard that could be. And honestly, I was like, I had full plans on going corporate, climbing in the corporate ladder. That was why I moved to Texas, to get more extensive marketing experience and work for bigger companies, kind of get that background so that if I ever wanted to come back, that I would have a good solid foundation. But through my experiences working, and I worked at like Fortune 500 companies in Texas, so there's a lot of really cool stuff that went with that, and I got to be exposed to a lot of really cool events and different marketing practices and things like that. And just through those experiences, eventually I decided to move back to Montana, and just through a contractor position started to find my way into the business world. And actually before I ever got into loaded baked potatoes, I was involved in an oil field services workover company, and that was kind of my first taste. I was a very, very small partner, but enough to get my feet wet and learn all the ins and outs of business, which kind of really gave me that confidence to move into my own business when we decided to sell that. And I just really found that entrepreneurship and business ownership, with the way my personality is, I'm not risk averse. I like to take risks. I like to think of new things. I like to be creative. I like to always be challenged, honestly. Like, obviously entrepreneurship comes with a ton of challenges and problems you're constantly fixing on a daily basis and figuring out how to improve. And as I started to get into all that, I realized how much I absolutely just loved the process. Obviously, you hope to be super successful one day, but in my opinion, in order to stay in entrepreneurship and stay in business, you have to love the process too, of climbing and growing and improving and all that fun stuff. So yeah.
Well, I really like what you say about you not being risk averse, because I think most people in at least our country, I don't know about the rest of the world, most people do not want to take risks. They want to have a secure job, with their health insurance
Right.
and everything else kind of laid out. Why do you think you're so different? Because not everybody's wired like you.
Right. I will attribute some of that probably to my dad.
Sure.
I think obviously you always go through nature versus nurture, but I think some of that is he was always willing to take risks, and I, you know, being the child, I always rode that boat with him too. So I kind of knew what it felt like and what it was like, and the high highs you get and the low lows you get, and then just constantly like thinking and improving. And so yeah, I would say just through that process, I found out that I really was not scared of jumping into stuff. And when I like to think about it too is looking at is like, you know, if it's some people, I believe everybody has a role in this world, you know, and some people, like, that is a more fitting role. You don't have to always want to be, maybe you're not naturally somebody that likes to take risks, and that's totally fine.
Sure.
But I think that's how we kind of all find our path, and I found that I got pretty comfortable taking really big risks, and I was like, actually, this is a good spot for me. Like, this is the exact kind of role that fits my personality and who I am. And yeah, but I also say too, more, you know, some people don't like to take risks, but some people do, and they're just scared of that first jump too. So I'd say it's just kind of learning along the way. Like, you're going to fail a lot, and as long as you're comfortable with failing and learning, and sometimes that failure costs you money, but it's also still a learning experience too. It's just like you go to college, you pay to learn. You can also pay to learn in the real world, but it's just a different kind of gamble with your money and your lifestyle or whatever that may be.
So were there any risks you took that in hindsight were maybe not good ideas at the time?
Yeah, so I mean, I've trialed out a lot of different things.
Okay.
I'm always thinking of ideas, and I'm always
yeah.
trying to move, and I watch a lot of motivational talks and podcasts, and I like to read and stuff too, and when I do get the chance. But it's just, I mean, you have to pay to play, obviously, but yeah, it's always so interesting learning along the way. But back to your point of the different ideas and stuff, I've trialed all different kinds, like Food Trailer itself, looking at Baked and Loaded Co., just that business itself has been so much trial and error. Now, obviously it's been doing well, but through that process, that growth process, there's been so many failures and successes along the way. So within, it's kind of a two-part question, but within every business, you're going to find what fails and what doesn't fail, and then you hope to pivot from each of those points. But then separately, I've also tried out some kind of other ideas, and one of them I actually is kind of integrated into Baked and Loaded, as I had a second food trailer with my brother. It was probably a little over a year ago we had that, and it focused mainly on doing drinks, so like the dirty sodas, kind of like soda station drinks. And because I saw that trend and I saw how things were working, and my brother wanted to kind of get in and get his feet wet too, so we both decided to go into business together and try it out. And it did well. He ended up getting another job, so it really reduced how much I could spend on that business. But just like a learning experience from that is, while, you know, two separate trailers, that was a bit more to handle, taking some of the drink ideas and incorporating that into a business that I'd already started building and that I'd already was using. And because it was a very complementary thing. So like that business was called The Fix, and then I've recently started taking those drinks and fitting into my brand now. I call them loaded sodas. So you have loaded potatoes and loaded sodas.
I love that.
So yeah, so you kind of and so I wouldn't necessarily call that a failure. It wasn't a wild success, but it was still a good learning experience that brought me to the next stage of another business. So yeah, that was one of them. And then I told you before I got started in the Baked and Loaded, I was involved in an oil field services company, so we did plug and abandonment work. So basically, after a well's been drilled, after so much time, you have to go in, close off the well, seal the hole, reclaim the land, basically bring everything back to how it was before. Because environmentally, you can't just have a bunch of open holes in the ground.
Sure.
So our business focused on, yes, exactly. There's lots that goes with that. But in a nutshell, our business focused on, you know, going back and plugging those holes and reclaiming the land and stuff like that. That business was extremely complicated. We worked in multiple states. We had crews, the kind of regulations you have to go through for like oil field stuff and MSA contracts. So that taught me an immense amount of, you know, how to handle different aspects of business on a higher level. And then I'm like, oh, when I came to the food truck idea, I was like, this is going to be a lot easier than that one. Well, not easier, but, you know, different sense. I knew I could handle it because of all the experience that I'd had from that one. And then going back, again, that one wasn't a wild success either. We spent a lot of money to start that business, and it made a lot of money, but the biggest issue we had was people and just the nature of the workforce in the oil field and how fast people move and keeping people, and eventually it just became where it was the work started to outweigh like what the business was. And so that's another thing you kind of have to do when you're in business, is you have to figure out where to draw that line. Like, are these problems going to be fixable? Is this a temporary thing, or what's the long-term kind of look on that? So at the conclusion of that, we eventually all decided, there was 4 partners in that, we decided to sell. So again, learning from that and learning.
Sure, but you sold something.
Exactly.
I mean, that wouldn't be called a failure.
Anyway, again, I would never think there's really a failure. I try to look at it always as a learning experience, because also if I look at things as a failure, then it makes me not want to be as risky or like want to step out again, right? If you're like, if you like categorize that in your brain as this business was a failure, or this didn't work out, I had to sell it, or I had to close it down, whatever it was. If you think you're like, oh, failure, then the next time you have an idea or you want to go out on something, I believe your likelihood is way less, because you've already talked yourself into thinking that you failed at this. How can you go succeed at something else? So I always try to look at it as somewhat of a lesson, you know, whether it fails, crashes, and burns, or it's like, okay, you know, there's this win here. There's always something good that you can learn from whatever you do.
Well, that's really refreshing, because I know, I mean, just with anything, like if you don't think you can do it,
that's the,
you don't do it.
You count yourself out, like before you can even start, you count yourself out if you kind of have that mindset.
Who am I to do this?
Right, exactly, 100%.
So the other thing I'm really curious about, so you have a marketing degree, and I studied marketing as well in college. Nice. How has that come into play with especially your current businesses now? Because I'm sure you have to get the word out, right?
Oh yeah,
so people know about these businesses.
Absolutely. You know, I've been asked that a couple times. I would say more for me, what's crazy, and I'm sure you can attest to this too, is marketing changes so much. Every single year, every decade. I graduated in 2016, and the marketing from 2016 to 2025, the strategies and what you do is completely different, right? So I think looking more as like the principle of marketing. So I kind of go back whenever I want to look at that, because obviously, again, social media changes everything. That's all changed since 2016. So some of the basic principles aren't quite the same, but to me, it's always the psychology of marketing, the psychology of a consumer, how people make decisions, what people value, what improves their life. So always going back and looking through the eyes of the consumer versus like, I'm a business, here's my product, it's great, right? But like the consumer is always going to look at things differently. So and then again, trialing things, same with marketing, right? Like you'll be like, oh, I think this is a bad idea when I want to get something out. And you're like, oop, that was a bad idea. Or maybe you're like, oh, that surprised me. But again, it's always, to me, it's always trialing those different things, especially in the marketing realm. And then always going back to the basis of marketing, which was a lot of what I learned in school and what interested me in marketing in the first place, was the psychology of how people make decisions, why they make decisions, and what really resonates, and what just brings value. Because in the end, you want to bring value with your business. So.
Well, of course. I mean, you want to have a product that people actually want. I mean, you can try to sell things that people don't want, but
hey,
it's
they
harder.
sell air now. So whenever people are like, it's a bad, like there's a bad business idea, I'm like, you can literally buy oxygen. Like, imagine how ridiculous that person felt at first. And they have a multi-million-dollar company. Yeah. All the different water brands that come out, and all of it is branding, right? Like Liquid Death was like a recent one that came out in the last year, and you know, they put it in a can, they changed their marketing, and people wanted to buy it. So again, it all always boils down to psychology. Now, I'm sure it's very filtered water, and you know, could add electrolytes or whatever it is. But in the end, it always comes down to like some fresh new packaging and what really attracts people to it too. So that's kind of like the psychology of the marketing that I always look at.
So how did you think of potatoes as a possibility? Was that also from living somewhere else?
It was. So when I was down in Texas, food truck community was super huge when I lived down there, and obviously it's grown immensely in Billings, but always starts in the bigger cities, and then it starts to trickle up. But I'd gone to there's a place in Dallas called the Truck Yard that I like to go to, and the way they had it set up is they had you know, like 4 or 5 food trucks, picnic tables. It was basically a venue with food trucks set up, and so I had tried something there once, and it was a loaded potato concept, and I was like, this is a really cool idea. But again, I wasn't entrepreneurial. I wasn't thinking in that way. I just was like, oh, this is really good. A, I really like it. And B, it seems like a good idea. And then, I pocketed it. And then later on, when I came back and I started getting involved in the Billings community and the business community, I was like, you know what, why don't I dive into that idea just a little bit more? And so I, started looking at all the numbers, because again, you want to make sure the numbers make sense, your margins, because you can have a great product, but if you can't keep it sustainable, it's, you're not going to last.
Right.
So I started looking again at all the numbers, the margins, and then I was looking at the restaurant industry and the food industry, and like some of the things that I saw was being able to keep your menu super, super simple, right? Mm-hmm. So the more simple your menu, you typically have better profit margins because you're going to have less food waste.
Right.
You can dial in all your products. So like 2 of my menu items have the same protein, so I'm able to use that same protein instead of buying some whole other ingredient hoping I sell it, So I started to kind of structure things around that kind of an idea. And then also just boiling it down to like what tastes good, what goes, and everything. The beauty of the potato is everything can go on it, right? Mm-hmm. Potatoes go with everything in our lives,
and
pretty
potatoes
much.
Don't
They're
have
so
a lot
versatile.
of spoilage.
No, they're
That's
not.
one good
yeah,
thing.
Exactly. And so, I just started looking at, I'm like, you can literally put just about any meal on a potato and still keep that like variation, and then, but still have that same kind of brand theme and deliver something. Again, everybody loves potatoes, so you can't go wrong.
So what did you do to get the word out when you first
Yes,
started?
so when I first started, obviously I opened up a Facebook account, business Facebook account, and then the first thing I did was I saw on Billings, there's a Billings food truck tracker group.
Sure.
I think there's 40-some thousand people in there. And I joined that group, and I just started watching it every single day. And then when I started to get things ready for the trailer, I started going through, and because all the food trucks post where they're going to be through that tracker and stuff. And so I started seeing where everybody was going. Because I wanted to know like what are the typical spots these like food trucks go in Billings. So I started looking those up. I made a list. I started just calling up those businesses or messaging those businesses, asking if I could come park there, and then posting to that group. And then there's a couple other groups. I think there's Eat Local Billings and Eat Local Billings surrounding areas. There's a couple groups. So I utilized those like Eat Local groups a lot in the food truck tracker.
That's not very expensive.
Right,
either.
no, it's free.
Yeah.
As long as you're a food business and you're
Sure.
contributing to that. But yeah, it's totally free. So posting in groups was kind of how I first got going. And then honestly, that whole first summer that I started, I was just out every single day. It was grueling, but I knew that I had to be out a lot that whole first summer in order to get my feet underneath me so that, I could set myself up for success in the future and not have to run it as hard in the future. So it was just a lot of posting to those groups. I honestly, it's funny, being a marketing major, I slacked so much on my social media and my advertising because I was, as an owner, you can have a marketing background or an accounting background, but the second you step into the operator role and running the business, those things tend to fall to the side. So I definitely slacked a lot on my social media. I finally just got an Instagram going like last year, which I should have started that way long ago, and now I'm getting into like paid ads and things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's posted a lot in the groups to start, and then just honestly, I've been focusing a lot this year on like more consistent content and stuff that people want to engage with, and they want to read your stuff. So it's not just talking about the same thing over and over again, but
right.
something fresh for people to see, because we have such a short attention span now. When you're scrolling on your phone, if something doesn't jump out at you, you're not going to stop.
Right,
so the goal
right.
is to get people to stop and look and see what you're offering or where they
right.
can find you. So I've been focusing on that a little bit more this last year as we've been growing. But yeah, just boots on the ground, getting your name out there and seeing as many people as you can, going to big events, and then, yeah, utilizing those groups and talking to businesses, honestly. And Billings has a really great food truck community. So like the owners of the other food trucks and stuff, they're great to talk with and collaborate with, and everybody's super helpful with each other.
So how do you find locations to park your food truck? Do you you have to go talk to the businesses too?
Absolutely.
So that's another whole piece, marketing
Yes.
to businesses.
Yep. So honestly, and again, this boils down, Billings is a very, very food truck friendly community. So going in, like when you talk to a business, 9 times out of 10, they're pretty open to having you. Because most of the time, most trailers in town roll with their own generator, so it's not costing the business money. It's typically like a good add-on for that business too. It could be for their employees, or if they have customers that are coming in and it's right around lunchtime, it might be a good fit for that. To get their foot traffic too, because then it's like, oh, double whammy, I can go shopping and grab some food. But yeah, again, same thing as now I know who to pretty much talk to and like where to go and all that. But starting out, it was just going, finding the businesses, making a list of where everybody was going, and calling those businesses up and telling them who I am, what I serve, and asking if they'd ever let me want to come park there.
Well,
pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of elements, even though you think, well, food truck's got to be easier than a restaurant, but in a way it's harder.
Right, for sure. I would say probably one of the biggest struggles in the food truck is the mobility of it. As you're constantly moving, things can shake and move. You can never just leave things. Like obviously there's big things that you can bolt in and organize so that things don't move. But it's a constant movement, and I would say like a lot of your work is the mobility of the trailer, not just running the trailer. I mean, with any business owner, right, you have the whole back end of what people don't see. But yeah, the mobility of it takes up a whole lot of time, because it takes me an extra hour or more just to get the trailer situated for moving, let alone like without cooking and all that stuff, So yeah, it's definitely, in some ways, it can be easier than a restaurant, obviously, depending on like what kind of a restaurant too. The second you bring in like waitresses and things like that, obviously it gets a lot more complicated and all that. The beauty of the food trailer is you don't have to have a lot of people to run it, and you're very flexible. But on the flip side, yeah, the mobility does take up a lot of time, and it does present its own set of challenges, because it could be the generator that goes out on you. It could be the propane that decides not to work because it was too cold out or something, the mobility of it, or a flat tire, and all of a sudden, you can't make it to where you're going, or your pickup dies, or whatever it may be. The mobility of it presents its own set of challenges, and most of the time it's pretty manageable, but it can definitely get to be a lot.
And so how many days do you operate the food truck? I bet it depends on the season, right?
So I'm right 3 or 4 days a week is kind of what I do. But when I was first starting out, I was doing probably like 6 or 7 days a week, and then I was doing doubles too. So I was doing lunch and dinner. Where now I might, every now and then I'll do a lunch and dinner, but I try to space it out a little bit more now that I'm not having to like run myself so ragged. Because it's just me. I hire people to come work with me, obviously, but it's
kind of have like demands.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep.
Well, that's awesome. And you were also on an entrepreneurial show, which I thought sounded really cool. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so that happened rather quickly right after I started Baked and Loaded Co. So I started that food trailer in June of 2022, and I just bought the trailer. I didn't even have it in my possession, but I just bought the trailer.
Oh my goodness.
And I was scrolling through Facebook, as one does, and I saw an ad come up for an entrepreneurship reality competition show, and I was like, I've never been into like reality shows or anything. So I was like,
never wanted to be on.
No,
I've never had.
I don't really watch them either, and so I was like, strange. But I was like, if there's any kind of a reality show I'd be interested in, it'd be an entrepreneur one. So I'll click on it and check it out. So I started going through it and like reading about it, and I was like, and the first application was pretty short. So I was like, oh, what the heck? I'll fill it out, because they had applicants coming from all over the country. So I'm like, my odds, I'm not even in business yet. Because like how they work it is you can be from a complete startup, or you can be a business that's making millions, like under 10 million a year. They kind of cap it at that. But so it's a very diverse range, but they do include like a very, very early stage startups. And so I'm like, I don't know. Anyway, I filled it out. I sent it in, and then probably about a week later, I got another email, and they're like, we're interested in learning more about you. I was like, oh, okay. So I filled out another lengthier application, send it in again, and then it was probably 2 weeks after that, I got another email, and they wanted to set up a Zoom meeting with one of the casting directors, and I was like, it's getting real. I didn't think I'd make it this far. Honestly, I did not think I'd make it this far. And I was like, oh, okay. So I did that, and then about a week or so later, I got another call, and I did another Zoom interview with another casting director. And after that, about 2 weeks later, I got my acceptance, and they're like, "Oh, we'd like to have you," and that was insane. I did that in August of 2022. So I'd only been in business for, a little over a month at that point. But I flew down to Kansas City, and there were 49 other entrepreneurs there, and they were from across the country. I believe they selected from a pool of about 20,000 people throughout the nation. And so I was just pumped to be there. But how they structured it is they had judges, and so we would kind of do like a little bit of like a learning module in the morning of like a specific subject. It could be talking about investors or equity or like a tech stack, how you can implement certain tech systems in your business, whatever it might be that day. And then later on, the host of the show, Wes Bergman, he would give us a prompt, and we would divide out into groups, and essentially you'd get the prompt, and it would have something to do with like what we had learned. And so you'd have to apply that to your business in some way, shape, or form, whatever the question was. You'd have about 5 minutes to come up with like your pitch, like on the spot, divide out,
Wow.
and then you'd have to present based on it, like on everything that we had learned earlier, and then everything of how that can apply to your business itself. So it really forced you to take something that you had like learned right away and figure out how to implement it right away into your business. I'm just as guilty as the rest of them. I'll see an idea and I'm like, ooh, table that for later. I'm gonna work on that later, But going through those exercises, and then also being judged by business owners who were making millions and millions in their business. So knowing that they come from a very reputable background with very real world experience, and getting feedback from those kinds of people was truly amazing. So yeah, it was a ton of fun. Like I said, we filmed for a week. I did not win, but it was, I know.
Darn it.
I know. Anyway, it was a great networking, and it was great learning experience, and I still am connected with all the people that I met through there, and they all live everywhere, and so it's always nice to talk to like-minded individuals when you run into problems and stuff.
Well,
so.
that's awesome. Well, before we go, I want to make sure you can tell people how to get a hold
Yeah.
of both your stacked and loaded business and also your photo booth business.
Yeah, so I am available on Facebook and Instagram under Baked and Loaded Co. Also recently on TikTok, trying to grow that. And then I also have a website, bakedandloadedco.com. And then for Summit 360 Photo Booth and Events, Facebook and Instagram, the exact business name, and then summit360events.com. So all of them have websites, all of them have social media, and they all have the links to get to all the places on there. So shouldn't be able to get too lost.
And you're a lot of fun to work with too, I would imagine.
Thank you.
I would imagine you bring that photo booth by and everybody livens up.
It's a blast, yeah.
Well,
especially with the motion. People love to see themselves in motion, and it's such a unique angle versus more like traditional booths. So that's always a fun way, and people get to really loosen up a little too. So it is a blast.
It has been so much fun meeting you today. You are just really energetic, invigorating. I love your attitude of
thank you.
Just go for it and don't think about it as failure. I love that. I think all of us can learn from that.
Thank you so much. I've sure enjoyed being on here.
Yeah, well, and thank you everybody for joining us today on All About Billings, and we hope to see you next time.